The death certificate did not belong where it was. Elias Morven noticed it immediately, not because of the name or the date or even the cause of death, but because of the filing code stamped in the lower right corner. It was wrong, subtly wrong. Wrong in a way most people would never notice, and in a way that suggested intention rather than accident. He slid the thin sheet of paper out from the folder and held it beneath the fluorescent light that hummed softly above his desk. The paper was older than it looked, replaced, perhaps, reissued. The ink had settled into the fibers as if it had been pressed there years after the fact. The filing code, I-17B, was reserved for infrastructure-related fatalities, collapses, failures of public works, incidents where responsibility could be diluted across committees and budgets. Harold Bell had died in a private residence. Elias checked the code again. Still wrong. He turned the certificate over. There was a faint impression on the back, visible only when held at an angle. Pressure marks from another document once stapled to it. Removed later. Someone had decided this death should stand alone. Cause of death. Accidental fall. Elias read the line twice, then a third time. He did not believe it. Greyhaven had never been large enough to forget its dead. It sat between two rivers that never quite flooded and a highway that never quite noticed it. People were born there, worked there, and died there, often within the same few square miles. In cities, the dead became numbers. In Greyhaven, they became stories. Half-finished sentences traded at grocery counters and after church services. The municipal building had once been a school. Elias could still see where classrooms had been divided into offices. The archive occupied what had once been a gymnasium storage room. Low ceiling, no windows, the past stored where equipment had once waited between games. The archive smelled like paper, dust, and something faintly metallic. Old ink, perhaps, or time itself. It spoke in small sounds, buzzing lights, shifting shelves. The rasp of paper moved after long sleep. Elias had worked there for 11 years. He was not from Greyhaven originally, but the town had begun to treat him as if he were. Clerks nodded when he passed. Retired council members waved with faint recognition. He knew which boxes held which decades without checking the labels. Most days were quiet. Census updates, property transfers, death records requested by relatives who no longer remembered where their grandparents had lived. Today, the silence felt rehearsed. The certificate belonged to a man named Harold Bell. Date of death: April 17th, 1994. Location: West Row Housing Block. The folder label read Infrastructure Incidents, 1990 to 1999. Accidental falls belonged elsewhere. Workplace injuries, domestic accidents, medical misadventures. Elias returned the certificate and continued scanning. That was when he saw the second name, H. Bell. Different folder, different year, same address. Date, May 3rd, 1971. Cause of death, structural collapse. Greyhaven had lost only one building to collapse in living memory, the old boarding house on West Row. Everyone over a certain age still talked about it. 2 deaths. Same location. Same surname. Elias told himself it was coincidence. Then he found the third filing. The third certificate was brittle, its typewritten letters faint, but legible. Henry Bell. November 12th, 1948. Accidental fall. Same block, same stretch of land. The spelling difference was small enough to be dismissed. Too small, Elias thought, not to be deliberate. He compared the signatures. They matched, not identical, but consistent in pressure and restraint. Someone who had written the same way for decades. Maps followed, zoning layouts, property transfers, demolition permits, street names changed, lot numbers shifted, measurements stayed the same. A narrow rectangle of land, too narrow for how many structures had occupied it. Every 20 to 25 years, a death. Every time ruled accidental, every time the building was removed or reclassified. The town had rewritten that block again and again. The deaths had followed obediently. Elias locked the archive early. West Row no longer existed in name. It had been absorbed into a newer development, trimmed hedges, fresh paint, a playground built where the boarding house had once leaned. The wind moved differently there. It slipped unevenly between houses, catching on corners that no longer officially existed. The playground creaked even when untouched. Children avoided one corner without being told to, the way people avoided an unlit room. An older woman sat on a bench watching the children. She remembered the boarding house. She remembered the night it fell. She spoke of sounds rather than sights. "They said it was old," she told him. "Bound to happen." She paused. Someone always came after. Elias waited. "Paperwork, man," she said. "Knew how to make things neat." Neat was not the same as clean. "Afterward," she continued. "Never during, always after." She told him about the questions, forms, copies, where things were sent. "He said accidents were easier," she said. "Easier for everyone." Her eyes sharpened. "Easier to forget." Elias did not take notes. Some testimonies survived longer that way. Back in the archive, Elias found the name. Martin Crow, city records officer, 43 years of service. Every death had passed through his desk. Crow had not killed anyone. He had learned where negligence could be filed as fate, where silence could be stamped as procedure. The town trusted paper. Paper had betrayed it. Elias prepared a report for the State Records Board. Patterns laid bare, copies of copies. Truth did not need confrontation. It needed light. The playground closed 3 weeks later. Records were corrected. Files reclassified. Elias returned the Bell certificates to a new folder, negligence, municipal. As he reached for the next box, he froze. Unlabeled. Inside were files marked only with symbols, triangles, Roman numerals, and the same handwriting. He checked the accession number, not local. Inside the lid, penciled faintly, transferred by request. No signature, no date, only a small, precise triangle. Elias had seen that symbol before, on correspondence that never appeared in the index. Requests fulfilled without record. Someone wasn't erasing history. They were collecting it. Elias left the box on his desk and turned off the light. The archive hummed softly around him. Greyhaven waited. So did whatever had learned how to speak through paper. The next day, Elias returned to an envelope that appeared in the intake tray like it had been waiting for permission. No postage stamp, no return address, just Greyhaven's municipal crest printed faintly on the flap. An outdated version, the kind the town hadn't used in years. Elias Morven noticed that first, because he noticed things that were supposed to be invisible. He did not open it right away. He checked the intake log instead. There was no entry. The tray was for requests, birth certificates, death records, property deeds, anything the living needed from the dead and the forgotten. Every request was supposed to pass through the front desk upstairs, then down to him with a paper trail. This one had skipped the trail. Elias turned the envelope over. A small triangle was drawn on the back in clean, precise pencil. Not a doodle. Not a mark made while thinking. A symbol made with intention. He slid a letter opener beneath the flap. The paper inside was heavier than standard municipal stock, smooth, expensive in the way that didn't want to be noticed. The message was one line. Request, release all associated files. Lot 14/West Row Subdivision. Historic. No signature, no department. At the bottom, the triangle again, this time pressed so firmly into the page it left a shallow groove. Elias stared at it until the fluorescent light above him stuttered. Somebody was asking for the same history he had just learned to see, and they were asking for it before the state ever could. Elias locked the archive door behind him and tested the handle twice. He had never done that before. The unlabeled box from the day before still sat on his desk, squared neatly with the edge as if it belonged there. Triangles, Roman numerals, handwriting that felt familiar enough to be personal. He opened the box and removed the top file. A photograph slipped out, not of a body, not of a building, a street sign. West Row. The photo looked recent, color, sharp edges, but the sign itself was old, bolted to a post that shouldn't exist anymore. On the back, in the same careful hand, either we remember on purpose, or we remember by accident. Elias lowered the photograph slowly. The woman on the bench had said accidents were easier. This felt like an answer. By the end of the week, Greyhaven had learned how to speak about West Row again. Not openly, not in meetings, but in the way towns communicated, pauses in conversation, glances that lasted too long, sudden kindness from people who didn't know why they were being kind. The playground fence remained. A temporary sign had become permanent by sheer neglect. Elias kept working, but he felt the town's attention like weather. He had mailed his report to the State Records Board. But there was a difference between filing a truth and changing it. Truth moved slowly. Whoever sent the envelope moved faster. The phone rang in the archive on a Tuesday that looked exactly like every other Tuesday. Elias stared at it. The archive phone rarely rang. People called the front desk, people called the clerk, people called anybody who could be pressured into shortcuts. This was the first time in 11 years the call had come directly to him. He answered. "City Archive," he said. Silence. Not dead air, breathing, controlled, patient. Then a voice, low and polite. "Mr. Morven?" it said. Elias did not ask how they knew his name. "You received our request," the voice continued. "We'd like to ensure it's processed promptly." "Requests are logged," Elias said. "This one wasn't." A small pause. "We're correcting that," the voice said. "Consider this the log." Elias felt the skin at the back of his neck tighten. "What department are you with?" he asked. Another pause, fractionally longer. "Records," the voice said, as if that should be sufficient. Elias looked at the triangle on the letter and spoke carefully. "Records don't call the archive. People do." The voice almost smiled through the line. "Then perhaps," it said, "it's time you remembered that too." The call ended. Elias held the receiver a moment longer than necessary, listening to the dial tone as if it might confess. Elias did not process the request. Not yet. Instead, he did what he had done his whole life. He cross-referenced. Lot 14/West Row Subdivision. Historic. The designation historic was strange. Greyhaven rarely labeled anything historic unless it was being sold as charming. He pulled the subdivision ledger. Lot 14 didn't exist, not officially. Lot 13, Lot 15. A clean skip where 14 should have been. Elias flipped back decades. The number was missing in every ledger, as if the town had agreed, silently and without discussion, that some places did not deserve a name. Elias set the ledger down and looked at the unlabeled box. If someone was collecting history, then the missing lot was not an absence. It was a hiding place. Elias drove 32 minutes north to a town called Millbrook, small enough that its diner and its post office shared a parking lot. He did not tell anyone where he was going. Millbrook had an archive, too, smaller than Greyhaven's, kept in a back room of the library beside shelves of donated romance novels and decades-old encyclopedias. The archivist there was a woman named June Halpern, older than Elias by at least 20 years, with hands stained faintly blue from ink and habit. She looked at his municipal ID and sighed as if she had been expecting him for years. "You're late," she said. Elias blinked. "Excuse me?" June nodded toward the back room. "You're the second one this month. Greyhaven's always late to its own problems." She unlocked the archive door. On the handle, someone had drawn a triangle in pencil. June Halpern did not turn on the overhead light. She preferred the desk lamp, yellowed shade, soft reach. It made the room feel older than it was, and therefore honest. "Before you ask," she said, sliding a key ring back into her pocket. "Yes, they've been here too." Elias looked at the triangle on the handle. The graphite was fresh. "Who are they?" he asked. June gave a thin smile. "People who don't introduce themselves. People who already know what they're looking for." She pulled a drawer open and set 3 folders on the table. None had titles. Each was marked with a Roman numeral. "They don't take files," June said. "They request copies. They're very polite about it." Elias opened the first folder. Inside was a death certificate. Different town, different decade, same handwriting. Millbrook's records told a story Elias already knew how to read. Accidents, structural failures, falls. Each one tied to a location that no longer existed. Each one followed months or years later by redevelopment. June watched him compare signatures. "You see it," she said. Elias nodded. "They don't erase history, they curate it." June exhaled slowly. "That's what I told the last archivist." "Last?" Elias asked. She hesitated. "From Brenton, 2 towns over. He stopped answering his phone after they visited." Elias closed the folder. The triangle wasn't a signature. It was a root. June poured coffee that tasted burned and necessary. "There are rules," she said. "They never force access. They never threaten. They just ask. Early, before oversight, before corrections. And if you refuse?" Elias asked. June met his eyes. "They ask someone else." That was worse. "They want originals eventually," she added. "But copies are enough to start." She tapped the Roman numerals. "They build sets." "For what?" Elias asked. June shook her head. "I don't know, but they don't collect people. They collect permission." Elias found lot 14 in Millbrook, or rather, he found where it should have been, a gap in numbering, a footnote redirecting to a map that no longer existed. June leaned over his shoulder. "Every town has one," she said quietly, "a place everyone knows without naming." Elias thought of West Row, the wind, the children avoiding a corner they couldn't explain. "They don't just move records," he said. "They move memory before it forms." June nodded. "That's why they come to us first." Elias drove back to Greyhaven after dark. The archive lights were on. Someone had been there. Nothing was missing. Everything was aligned more neatly than he'd left it. On his desk sat a new envelope. No crest this time, just the triangle. Inside, a copy request form, perfectly filled out in his own handwriting. Except he hadn't written it. At the bottom, a note. "We prefer to work with people who notice things." Elias stood alone in the archive. He placed the request form beside the unlabeled box. 2 paths, compliance or custody. He reached for the stamp, then stopped. Instead, he opened a new ledger. On the first page, he wrote a title the town had never approved. "Places, removed before record." He locked the book away under his own accession number. Outside, Greyhaven slept. Somewhere, someone waited for an answer. Elias turned off the light. He did not send one. On the morning the first demand arrived in person, the archive door opened inward. It wasn't supposed to. Elias Morven noticed the hinges before he noticed the man. The hinges had been replaced at some point. Newer metal, cleaner screws, installed to swing the door the opposite way. That alone was a violation. The man who stepped through wore a municipal jacket, the sort issued to maintenance and utilities. He carried a clipboard and an expression that looked professionally harmless. "Mr. Morven," the man said. Elias did not offer his name. "I'm here for a compliance check," the man continued, as if the words were routine. "Records integrity." His eyes drifted, not around the room, but toward Elias's desk, toward the unlabeled box, toward the empty space where a request form should have been filed. Elias felt the archive hum, a low mechanical breath beneath the building. "We don't have compliance checks," Elias said. The man smiled politely. "You do now," he replied. By noon, the town had begun to behave differently. People held doors a fraction too long, then let them close with soft finality. Clerks upstairs avoided eye contact, then overcompensated with cheerfulness. Elias heard his own name more often than he was used to, spoken in the careful tones of people discussing a storm they couldn't see. The compliance officer introduced himself as Glenn Rusk. He was too clean for municipal work. His boots had no scuffs. His clipboard was unbent at the corners. He asked for routine things: intake logs, processing times, verification stamps. Then, gently, he asked about Lot 14. "We received a request," Rusk said, tapping his pen against paper. "It appears to be delayed." "It wasn't logged," Elias replied. "We're correcting that," Rusk said, repeating the same phrase Elias had heard on the phone. The words landed with a familiar chill. Elias kept his face still. "All requests go through the front desk." "Not all," Rusk said. The sentence was mild. The implication was not. That evening, long after the municipal building emptied, Elias returned to the archive. He preferred it after hours. The shelves sounded different. Paper relaxed. He opened the locked cabinet beneath the map table and removed the ledger he had started the night before. Places removed before record. He ran a fingertip across the title. A new category made a place in the world. If he was careful, it could also make a defense. He added a first entry: Greyhaven, West Row Subdivision, Historic, Lot 14, unlisted. He paused, then wrote a second line beneath it: Millbrook, Riverbend Tract, Lot 14, unlisted. Patterns liked company. Elias listened. The archive did not answer. But somewhere in the building above, a floorboard creaked. He froze. No one else should have been there. Elias did not turn on the overhead light. He moved carefully between shelves, soundless in a room he had memorized. At the top of the stairwell, a faint strip of light cut across the floor. Someone had opened the door upstairs. Elias waited. Footsteps. Slow, confident. Not a burglar, not a clerk, a person who knew they belonged. Rusk appeared at the bottom of the stairs holding a small flashlight, the beam directed toward the ground as though he did not want to startle the past. "You keep late hours," Rusk said. Elias stood in shadow. "You keep early ones?" Rusk's smile was invisible, but Elias heard it. "I was in the building," Rusk said. "I thought I'd save you trouble." "Trouble," Elias repeated. "The kind that comes from delays," Rusk replied. He walked toward Elias's desk. Elias stepped into view. "You're not municipal," Elias said. Rusk stopped. His expression remained polite. "Municipal is a word," he said. "It's not a boundary." Then he angled the flashlight delicately toward the cabinet beneath the map table. "That's locked," Rusk noted. Elias did not respond. "We don't like locks," Rusk said softly. "They imply distrust." The archive hummed. Elias felt for the first time that it was listening too. Elias waited until Rusk left. He waited until the building was quiet again. Then he drove to the only payphone in town that still worked, a faded booth outside a closed laundromat, kept alive by stubbornness rather than profit. He dialed Millbrook. June Halpern answered on the third ring. "They came to you," June said before he could speak. Elias's grip tightened on the receiver. "How do you know?" "Because you called from a payphone," June replied, "and because you sound like someone who just learned what politeness can hide." Elias exhaled. "I started a ledger," he admitted. Silence. Then very quietly June said, "That's how it begins." "What begins?" Elias asked. "Custody," she said. or disappearing. Elias stared at the dark glass of the booth, catching his own reflection in the streetlight. "What happened to the archivist from Brenton?" he asked. June's pause was longer this time. "His files were processed," she said, "perfectly." The answer made Elias feel cold. "Come to Millbrook," June said. "Now. Don't take your car." "Why?" "Because they don't track people," June said. "They track routes." The line went dead. Elias parked 2 streets away from the municipal building and walked. He did not take the highway. He took the old roads that cut through fields and stands of trees. The roads older residents used when they didn't want to be seen. The sky was low with winter cloud, even though it was not yet winter. Along the way, he saw a triangular road marker nailed to a telephone pole. Not official, not accidental. He kept walking. In Millbrook, June met him behind the library, bundled in a coat that smelled faintly of dust and coffee. "You brought nothing," she observed. "I brought what I know," Elias said. June nodded. "That's what they want." June led Elias into the archive room and shut the door. She placed a folder on the table, a plain folder, no markings. "I didn't show you this before," she said. Elias opened it. Inside was correspondence, copies of letters that had never been indexed. All of them requested the same thing, associated files. All of them used the same triangle, and a phrase Elias recognized, "Consider this the log." June pointed to a line on one letter. In the margin, faint and almost erased, a name had been written and crossed out. Triune. Elias stared. "Is that what they call themselves?" he asked. "No," June said. "It's what someone else called them. Someone who regretted it." Elias turned the paper over. Another word, written by a different hand. Crow. The ink had bled as if the pen had pressed too hard. Elias looked up. June's face was grim. "Martin Crow wasn't the author," she said. "He was a branch." Elias felt the room tilt slightly, as if the shelves had shifted. "Then who?" he began. June held up a finger. "Not who," she said. "Where?" She set down a map. 3 towns circled. Greyhaven, Millbrook, Brenton. A triangle drawn connecting them. In the center, a place Elias had never heard of. Hollowford. "That's not a town," Elias said. "It was," June replied. "What happened to it?" Elias asked. June's voice dropped. "It was removed before record." Elias returned before dawn. The municipal building looked unchanged, but the archive door was propped open. A wedge of wood sat beneath it like a deliberate insult. Inside, Glenn Rusk stood at Elias's desk. He was not alone. 2 others waited near the shelves. One woman in a plain cardigan, one man with a paper cutter in his hands, like it was a tool for crafts rather than threat. Rusk looked up. "Mr. Morven," he said warmly. "We're so glad you're here." Elias did not move. On the desk lay his new ledger. Open. Rusk turned a page as if reading a story. "This is excellent work," Rusk said. "Truly. You've created a category that was overdue." Elias felt his throat tighten. "You broke a lock." "We corrected an impediment," Rusk replied. He tapped the ledger with one finger. "We can help you," he continued. "We can make your work official, properly indexed, protected." Elias stared at the triangle pin clipped to Rusk's lapel, so small it could have been decoration. "Protected from what?" Elias asked. Rusk's polite expression thinned. "From being remembered improperly," he said. Rusk slid an envelope across the desk. It was thick. Inside, Elias saw forms, employment forms, grants, letterhead, access authorizations, a new job made entirely of paperwork, a promotion that felt like a leash. "You like order," Rusk said. "You like patterns. We do too." Elias kept his hands at his sides. "You want the ledger," he said. "We want collaboration," Rusk corrected. "And if I refuse?" Elias asked. Rusk's smile returned, calmer than before. "Then someone else will do your work," he said, less carefully, with more noise. The threat was not to Elias. It was to the archive, to the truth. Elias's gaze went to the shelves, heavy with Greyhaven's memory. He pictured them emptied, not stolen, refiled somewhere else. "You asked for lot 14, Elias said. Rusk nodded. "It's time." "Why?" Elias asked. Rusk's eyes softened, almost sympathetic. "Because Hollowford is waking up," he said. Elias reached for the envelope. Rusk watched, satisfied. Elias took it. Then he did something Rusk did not expect. He walked past them, past the shelves, past the wedge in the door, up the stairs into the municipal building above. He went to the front desk. The clerk looked up, startled. "I need the request log," Elias said. The clerk hesitated. "Mr. Morven." "Now," Elias repeated. People turned to look. Elias took the logbook, opened it, and wrote in ink where everyone could see. "Unlogged request received. West Row, Lot 14, triangle mark, receipt, confirmed." He dated it. He signed it. He made the request real. The words sat on the page heavier than ink. Elias felt it immediately, the way a thing changed once it was written where others could see it. He dated the entry. He signed his name. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then he wrote again, slower this time. Each letter deliberate, measured, impossible to mistake for accident. Compliance Officer Glenn Rusk, present in archive after hours. Lock breach observed. The pen scratched louder than it should have. The sound carried across the front desk, across the room, into the quiet attention of people who had not intended to witness anything at all. The clerk stared at the page, then at Elias. Her mouth opened, closed. Somewhere behind them, a phone rang and went unanswered. This was how records became real. Not when they were filed, but when they were seen. Elias closed the logbook. As he stepped away from the desk, he felt it. The subtle shift in pressure. The same sensation he felt in the archive when a shelf had been moved or a file removed from its place. Downstairs, something had changed. Not broken. Corrected. Elias walked toward the door. He did not look back. Some requests, once made public, could not be unmade. The name did not appear on any modern map. Elias Morven confirmed that first. He sat at his kitchen table before dawn, a county atlas spread open beside a laptop that hummed softly with borrowed Wi-Fi. Digital maps showed roads bending politely around an empty space. Paper maps showed nothing at all, no Hollowford. The absence was careful. Names disappeared all the time, renamed streets, merged towns, census consolidations. But Hollowford had not faded. It had been excised. Elias traced the blank space with his finger. Whatever Hollowford had been, it had not been allowed to age. The reassignment memo waited for him when he returned to the municipal building. Temporary, it claimed. Administrative. Elias was no longer permitted to process death records without secondary approval. His archive access had been reduced to consultation only. The shelves had not moved. That was worse. They stood where they always had, filled with memory he was no longer allowed to touch. Rusk was not present. Instead, a woman from county oversight introduced herself and smiled too quickly. "We're just making sure everything stays orderly," she said. Order, Elias had learned, was a word that traveled easily between mouths. County records lived in a building that had once been a hospital. The floors sloped gently, as if the structure still remembered wheeled gurneys and hurried feet. The archive room smelled faintly of antiseptic beneath the dust. Elias signed in as a visitor. No one stopped him. Hollowford appeared here, not as a town, but as a footnote. Incorporated, 1891. Dissolved, 1936. No reason given. No successor jurisdiction, just a redirection code that pointed nowhere. Elias copied the reference number onto a scrap of paper and felt the familiar tightening behind his eyes. Dissolution without inheritance was bureaucratic heresy. The map room sat behind a locked door that required a key no one remembered ordering. An elderly clerk found it eventually, taped to the inside of a drawer. "We don't get many requests for that room," she said apologetically. Inside, rolled maps slept in labeled racks. Elias found Hollowford on a linen-backed county survey from 1912, a small town, one main road, a river crossing, and circled in pencil by an unknown hand, a triangle, not drawn recently. The graphite had aged into the fabric. Elias photographed the map and thanked the clerk. She did not ask why. The road to Hollowford still existed. It simply stopped being maintained. Elias followed it past a rusted county sign warning drivers they were leaving a maintained area. Trees leaned inward, narrowing the path. Gravel replaced asphalt. The river crossing was intact. Someone had repaired it. Beyond it, the road widened again, unexpected, deliberate, as if prepared. Elias parked and walked. The air felt different, not colder, held. There were no buildings, not ruins, not foundations, just impressions in the ground where structures had once pressed their weight. Fence lines without fences, a town without architecture. At the center stood a single thing that had not been removed, a filing cabinet, metal, 4 drawers, painted municipal green. It stood on bare earth, unlocked. Elias approached slowly. Inside were folders, each labeled with a street name that no longer existed, each folder empty, except the last. Hollowford, Associated Files. Inside was one document, a request form, perfectly filled out, signed decades ago, approved, stamped. At the bottom, a familiar mark, a triangle. Elias sat on the ground and read the form again. The request had not been to remove Hollowford. It had been to relocate it. Population, transferred. Records, reassigned. Land, reclassified. Hollowford had not been erased. It had been distributed across neighboring towns, into places like Greyhaven, into streets like West Row, the missing lots, the repeating accidents, a town broken into components and hidden in plain sight. Elias closed the folder. This was not neglect. It was planning. Elias found 3 more. A man who remembered a school that no longer existed. A woman who remembered being reassigned a birthday. A couple who remembered neighbors they were told never existed. Each had fragments. Each had been placed. Together they formed a town that still lived, quietly, inside other towns. Elias gathered them in Clara's living room. 5 people, 1 memory. "If this goes public," one asked, "what happens to us?" Elias did not lie. "You'll be logged," he said. "Properly." Silence. Then Clara nodded. "We were logged once," she said. "We survived it." Elias returned to the archive before dawn. He opened his private ledger. Places removed before record. Beneath Hollowford, he added a subheading, Surviving Population. He listed 5 names. Then a note, Hollowford persists as people, not land. Outside, Greyhaven woke. Across town, 5 people woke with the same quiet certainty. They had not imagined their past. They had been moved. And now, they were being remembered. Clara Hensley's chair was empty. That was how Elias Morven knew something had happened. He stood in her doorway with the morning still clinging to his coat and watched the living room hold its breath. The lace curtains were drawn. The photographs stared forward without names. The air smelled faintly of chamomile and dust. Clara's cane leaned against the table where she always left it. But Clara was not there. Elias called her name once. No answer. He did not call again. Calling twice was what you did when you wanted the world to hear you had looked. Elias stepped inside and found the twine bundle of papers on the table, untied, neatly spread, and in the center, a municipal note card stamped with Greyhaven's crest, not the old crest, the current one, written in careful handwriting, transfer complete. Beneath it, a small triangle, Greyhaven pretended all day. The grocery store clerk asked Elias about the weather. The librarian asked if he needed help finding a title. A neighbor waved too brightly. When Elias mentioned Clara, people responded with the same soft confusion. "Clara," they said. "I haven't seen her in a while." Or, "Didn't she move to be closer to family?" The stories were too convenient, too aligned. Elias wrote the phrases down in his head and felt his jaw tighten. Someone was distributing a person. Elias drove to Millbrook without using his phone. June Halpern met him at the library's back door like she had been waiting. "It happened," she said. Elias did not ask what. He held out the note card. June read it and closed her eyes. "They don't like living evidence," she said. "Where did they take her?" Elias asked. June shook her head. "They don't take, they reassign." "That's the same thing," Elias said. June's voice turned hard. "No, taking leaves gaps. Reassigning replaces them." She took Elias's wrist and pulled his sleeve up. There, on the inside of his forearm, was a faint graphite smear, a triangle. Elias stared. "They touched you," June said. Elias felt suddenly sick. "When?" he asked. June's gaze flicked toward his coat. "When you weren't looking." June spread maps across the table, not county atlases, delivery routes, old mail paths, school district lines. "They don't track people," June reminded him. "They track routes." Elias thought of the triangular marker nailed to a pole. "If Clara was reassigned," he said, "she was reassigned along a path that already exists." June nodded. "A path that looks like normal life." Elias traced a line between Greyhaven and Brenton. "Brenton," June said quietly. Elias looked up. "That's where the archivist stopped answering," he said. June's face tightened. "And where the processing became perfect." Brenton sat in a hollow of farmland, its main street too wide for its traffic, its storefronts too clean for their business. Elias arrived mid-afternoon. The town felt like a place someone had reset. He went to the municipal building. The clerk greeted him by name. Elias paused. "You have my file," he said. The clerk's smile did not change. "We have everyone's file, Mr. Morven." Elias asked for the archive. "Of course," the clerk said, and handed him a visitor badge already printed. Elias Morven. Consultation. A triangle watermark shimmered faintly in the plastic. Brenton's archive was too bright. The shelves were labeled with clean, modern tags. The floor was swept. The air smelled like fresh paper, impossible for a room full of old records. A man stood inside with his hands clasped behind his back. He wore no municipal jacket, just a gray sweater. He looked like somebody who could be anyone. "Mr. Morven," the man said. Elias felt his stomach tighten. "Glenn Rusk," Elias replied. The man smiled, patient. "Not today," he said. Elias stared. "My name is Damon Kerr," the man continued. "I oversee continuity." "I'm looking for Clara Hensley," Elias said. Damon's expression softened. "She's safe," he said. "Where?" Elias asked. "Reassigned," Damon replied. Damon walked to a shelf and pulled out a binder. It was labeled Greyhaven, West Row, Lot 14, Associated Files, Set 3. Elias's breath caught. "Set 3, he said. "You think in singulars," Damon said gently. "We think in sets." He opened the binder. Inside were copies of documents Elias had never released. Photos, maps, the note Elias had found in Clara's house. Transfer complete. "You broke into my archive," Elias said. Damon shook his head. "We never break. We correct impediments." Elias's hands curled into fists. "Why her?" he asked. Damon closed the binder carefully. Because you gathered them, he said. You formed a node. A node, Elias repeated. A group that remembers the same place, Damon said. That's a town. Elias felt cold. We dissolved Holliford once, Damon said. We can't allow it to reform inside people. Damon leaned closer. You can stop this, he said. By giving you what you want, Elias replied. Damon's expression remained kind. By helping us distribute memory responsibly, he said. Elias shook his head. That's not memory, that's control. Damon sighed as if Elias had disappointed him. Control is what keeps towns from collapsing, he said. Elias heard, faintly, the hum of fluorescent lights, the archive listening. You can leave, Damon said, or you can be reassigned too. Elias looked past Damon at the shelves. Perfect labeling, perfect order, and one shelf that looked slightly newer than the rest. New screws, clean metal, swinging inward. Elias stepped toward it. Damon did not stop him. That was the mistake. Behind the shelf was a narrow door, a service corridor, and beyond it, sound, a human cough. Elias's breath caught. Clara, he whispered, a voice thin and tired. Don't say my name. Elias backed away from the hidden door. Damon watched him calmly. You see, Damon said, safe. That isn't safety, Elias said. Damon's smile finally hardened. Then sign, he said, sliding a paper across the table. A reassignment form, blank line. Elias's name typed at the top. If you sign, Damon said, she becomes a file again, not a person. Elias stared at the line. He looked at the door behind the shelf. He looked at the binder labeled Set 3. Then he did something neither of them expected. He picked up the pen and wrote, not his name, a title. Places removed before record. Surviving population. He slid the paper back. Now you're logged, Elias said. The fluorescent lights flickered. Somewhere behind the shelf, Clara coughed again. And outside Brenton, a town that didn't exist, continued to try to remember itself. The sound came first. Not voices, not footsteps, paper. Elias Morven stood in the Brenton archive with his hand still resting on the unsigned reassignment form. Behind the false shelf, Clara breathed shallowly, careful not to exist too loudly. The shelves around them began to move, not sliding, being adjusted. Binders lifted themselves a fraction of an inch and settled back into place. Labels aligned, corners squared. Damon Kerr watched calmly. Perfect processing, he said. It doesn't rush. Elias understood. The archive was correcting itself. If I raise my voice, Elias said, will anyone hear me? Damon tilted his head. Of course. And if Clara raises hers? Elias asked. Damon did not answer. That was the answer. You hide people by smoothing the world around them, Elias said. No alarms, no force, just paperwork. Damon nodded. Noise creates memory. We prevent noise. Elias glanced at the hidden door. She's not a file, Elias said. Not anymore, Damon agreed. She's a liability. A phone rang upstairs, once, then again. Damon frowned. That shouldn't, he began. Elias moved. He grabbed the binder labeled Set 3 and shoved it into his bag. Papers slid free, scattering onto the floor. The archive reacted instantly. Lights brightened. The hum sharpened. Elias, Damon said calmly, return that. Elias backed toward the shelf. You don't correct theft, Elias said. You correct disorder. He pulled the shelf handle. The hidden door opened with a sound like a held breath released. The corridor behind it was narrow, unfinished, and lit by a single bulb. Clara stood inside, smaller than Elias remembered, but upright. You shouldn't have come, she whispered. I should have come sooner, Elias replied. Damon appeared behind them. This is not an extraction, he said. There is no exit path logged. Elias took Clara's hand. "Then we make one," he said. They ran. Not fast. Fast was noticeable. They moved the way misplaced files moved, quietly through spaces that were meant to connect but not be seen. Service stairs, basement corridors, a door marked Record Storage, closed. Elias kicked it open. Inside was a room full of boxes, each stamped with a town name. Greyhaven, Millbrook, Brenton, and others Elias recognized only from footnotes. "They're all here," Clara said. "Copies," Elias replied. "They don't trust originals." Sirens wailed outside, not police. Building alarms, perfect processing escalating. Elias stopped. He dropped his bag, pulled out his ledger. Clara stared. Now, Elias said. He found a flat surface and wrote, "Brenton. Active distribution site. Unauthorized human reassignment observed." He dated it, signed it, then did something dangerous. He photographed the page, uploaded it, public records portal. The archive screamed, not audibly, digitally. Damon burst into the storage room. For the first time, his calm fractured. "You don't understand scale," he said. "Once this is indexed, it propagates." "That's the point," Elias said. "You'll destabilize 3 counties," Damon said. "Then they shouldn't have been built on removed towns," Elias replied. Damon reached for Clara. The lights went out. Greyhaven feels it. 62 to 68 minutes. Across Greyhaven, files misaligned. A street sign flickered. An old woman woke knowing the name of a school she'd never spoken aloud. Paper remembered. Elias and Clara emerged into daylight behind the Brenton building. The alarms cut off abruptly. Silence rushed in. Clara leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "What happens now?" she asked. Elias looked at his phone. Notifications stacked endlessly. Requests, questions, flags. "Now," he said, "they have to explain themselves." Behind them, inside the building, paper continued to move, not correcting, rearranging. For the first time, perfect processing was imperfect, and somewhere, a town that had been distributed began to pull itself together. The next morning, the correction arrived before the explanation. At 6:12 a.m., the public records portal removed Elias Morven's upload. At 6:13, it reappeared. At 6:14, the upload was still there, but attributed to a different office, in a different county, under a different retention code. The system did not delete the truth. It relocated it. Elias watched the changes propagate across his phone like ripples in shallow water. "They're indexing me," he said. Clara sat at the small kitchen table, wrapped in a borrowed sweater, listening to the house learn their presence. Greyhaven woke wrong. Street names flickered on municipal sites. A zoning map briefly showed a cul-de-sac that had never existed, then corrected itself. Death certificates queued for reclassification without prompts. Phones rang in offices that had not used phones in years. Elias received 3 notices by noon. Access review initiated. Custody status pending. Retention policy update, effective immediately. None were signed. Clara watched him read them. "They're putting you where they can reach you," she said. "They already have," Elias replied. They did not go to June. That would have been expected. Instead, Elias chose a place Triune would consider irrelevant. The County Genealogical Library. A volunteer-run room behind a shuttered courthouse annex, open 2 afternoons a week. Old family Bibles, obituaries clipped by hand, margins full of disagreements, memory that refused standardization. Clara breathed easier there. "They won't touch this," she said. Elias nodded. Not yet. He arrived while Elias was comparing microfilm. No badge, no jacket, just a man with tired eyes and a manila folder held too carefully. "I'm not Triune," the man said. Elias did not look up. "That's what they'd say?" The man smiled without humor. "I'm with the State Retention Review Board. We exist to keep counties from embarrassing themselves." He slid the folder across the table. Inside were screenshots of Elias's upload, every version, every relocation. "Your post forced an escalation," the man said. "They moved too fast." "Who is they?" Elias asked. The man hesitated. "That depends on how far back you want to log." The man spoke quietly. Triune was not a department. It was a protocol, written in the 1950s to prevent municipal collapse during mass relocation, floods, dam projects, industrial failures. The idea was simple. Distribute populations, normalize records, prevent panic. It worked, the man said, until it didn't. Elias thought of Hollowford, of West Row, of Set 3. "You never turned it off," Elias said. "No one knew how," the man replied. "And then it started updating itself." Clara listened, hands folded. "It decided people were variables." The man nodded. "And memory was noise." Elias opened his ledger. Places removed before record. "I've been keeping a shadow index," he said. "Names, routes, survivors." The man inhaled sharply. "You understand what that makes you?" "Observable," Elias said. "Auditable," the man corrected. "And dangerous." Elias slid the ledger across the table. "Then log it," he said. The man did not take it. "I can't," he said, "but someone else can." That night, Elias's phone rang once. A withheld number. He answered. "Mr. Morven," a voice said, older than Rusk, steadier than Damon. "Your activity has reached federal thresholds." Elias closed his eyes. "We'd like to relocate your work," the voice continued. "National continuity. Off record." "And Clara?" Elias asked. A pause. "She would be stabilized." Elias pictured filing cabinets on bare earth. "No," he said. The voice softened. "This isn't a refusal you can log." Elias returned to Greyhaven before dawn. The archive door stood open. Inside, the shelves were empty, not stolen, transferred. On his desk lay a single index card. No triangle, just a barcode. And text beneath it, "Reference accepted, primary index assigned." Elias turned the card over. A URL. He typed it in. The page loaded instantly. A search field. A prompt, "Enter subject." Elias hesitated, then typed his own name. The page returned one result. Not a file, a live record. Status. In process. Below it, a route map began to draw itself. 3 towns, then 4, then a 5th. The system was building a set. Elias felt the archive hum, louder than ever, everywhere at once. Behind him, the door closed, softly, carefully, as if the building had decided where he belonged. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, liking the video will help others to hear it, and subscribing ensures you don't miss what surfaces next.